Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the jury, good morning. Is Terrence Crosby the unluckiest man in the whole world? On his first night in Boston, he was raped by a stranger in room 610 of the Omni Parker house. And somehow, all of the evidence just happens to point to Terrence Crosby. Terrence Crosby is not the unluckiest man in the world. He is just the man who raped her as she slept in that hotel room and continued doing so even after she woke up and tried to fight him off of her. He raped her because he thought that he could do it anonymously and he thought that he could get away with it. But then he got caught red-handed, literally trying to flee the country. He isn't unlucky. He's just someone who did what he did, and then he got caught. And all of the evidence in this case points right to him because he's guilty. On March 15th of 2024, didn't know Terrence Crosby. She had absolutely no motive to say or do any of the things that brought him here. She had no reason to leave a hotel room in the middle of the night after having consensual sex with a man who she felt comfortable and safe with. She had no reason to leave that room and immediately disclose to a friend that she just got raped by a stranger, than to go to a hospital to talk to the police. She had absolutely no reason to say that this happened, put herself here, if it didn't. She had no reason to do it, and drinking alcohol didn't make her do it either. She didn't drunkenly fabricate a very detailed, very specific account of a stranger raping her that just happened to magically align with all of the other evidence in this case. In March of 2024, just living her life, spending time with her friends. On March 14th, she went out for the night. She met a man who she liked, who she had fun with, and she did what people sometimes do without knowing that she'd ever be here having to talk about it. She went home with that man. She went back to his hotel room with him. She had consensual sex with him in that hotel bed. Afterwards, she went to the bathroom, and when she came back, the man was asleep. She described him as being in a starfish position, spread out across that bed, the one closer to the window. He's loudly snoring. And so she didn't bother. She just went into the other bed, the free bed in the room, closer to the bathroom. She got under the covers. She fell asleep, having no idea what was about to happen to her. And then it did. She woke up with a stranger on top of her, already penetrating her vaginally as she slept. She had been in that utterly vulnerable position that sleep puts us all in. When Terrence Crosby went into that room and he saw sleeping, naked, completely defenseless in his bed, he exploited an opportunity. He had unfinished business from the bar. And if he woke up and complained, too bad. She doesn't know him. And he can always just say it's a he said, she said, right? He was unprepared for this attack, for the man's sudden sexual violence as she woke up. She wasn't able to defend herself until it was too late. She had been alone in the room with Liam O'Brien when she fell asleep, and she thought she was safe until she realized that she wasn't. And as Terrence Crosby thrust his penis repeatedly into, and as he pinned her down on the bed using his body weight and his hands, he told her that she liked it, that his friend couldn't do it for her, but that he would. He asked, or she asked, "What are you doing?" And she told him to stop, but he didn't. He kept pushing his penis inside of her vagina, even as she struggled against him. She was eventually able to get away from him. She tried to get out of there as fast as she could. And as the man pushed himself up against her, his body up against her outside of the bathroom, she was still naked and totally vulnerable to any other violence that he chose to inflict. And the steady soundtrack to all of this was Liam O'Brien snoring, spread out across the bed. He couldn't do anything to intervene, and the defendant knew it. He exploited Liam O'Brien's complete oblivion to his own advantage. He managed to find all of her clothes, which you know would have been impossible in that strange hotel room without there being some light. There's no way she would have been able to find those clothes. You heard that the bathroom light was on, but that was the only light source in the room. And as she found her clothes and got dressed in the bathroom with the defendant jiggling the door handle outside, she's not moving at a leisurely pace. She is in flight mode. She wasn't focused while this was all happening. She's not focused on studying the defendant's face. She's not asking him to pause so that she can jot down some notes about identifying marks or tattoos. And she's not asking him to stand head to head so she can compare her height against that of the man who was attacking her.
Okay, the Commonwealth, much different presentation than we saw from the defense. Let's get a break. We'll pick up more of it. The jury's been at it an hour plus. Back after this.
An Amber Alert triggered by a deadly shooting and 2 girls taken by their father.
But did Dustin Durin shoot the mother of his children in self-defense?
The Amber Alert murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a celebrated healthcare executive and her husband are accused of leaving their 6-month-old on the beach. We'll dive deeper as these parents face felony charges.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Back to court in just a minute, but first here's a quick look at some of the other cases we're tracking today here at Court TV.
In Florida, the defense's closing argument is underway in our newest live trial for a young woman accused of gunning down up-and-coming rapper Julio Fulio as part of an ongoing gang war.
In Michigan, a plea hearing is about to begin for a mother accused of killing her 17-year-old son just before his birthday because he allegedly didn't want to turn 18.
And in Indiana, former quarterback Mark Sanchez back in court today for a pretrial conference. This is ahead of his scheduled December trial.
We'll see if that actually happens. Hey, we're also standing by in Arizona where a father accused of killing his 2-year-old daughter after he left her in a hot car is back in court this hour for a second plea hearing ahead of his trial next week.
We'll keep you updated on all of these trials throughout the day. But for now, let's head back to Boston. We are watching closing arguments in the Irish firefighter rape trial. Let's go back in now for more of the state's closing.
He was too close to her. His body was against her. And then she was trying to get out as fast as she could, but she was able to tell that the man was white. She was able to tell that he was taller than her, that he had hair, short hair, unlike Liam O'Brien, who was bald. She could tell that he was naked and that he had an Irish accent. And she also knew that he was someone who was willing to hurt her. Her focus was on getting away from the danger, not turning her attention toward it. She did the one thing that she could do to make herself safe in that situation, and that's getting away from him and away from that room as fast as she could. And within 3 minutes of leaving that hotel room, she had written a series of angry but very coherent text messages. I hate everyone. is wrong with people? I woke up and a guy was inside of me telling me how much he knew I wanted it and how pathetic it was his friend couldn't give that. That's 3 minutes after she walks out of the door of that hotel room. You can see her leaving the hotel here at 2:17 on the timestamp. She went home and she changed before she eventually made her way to Mass General Hospital. You saw that she arrived at Mass General Hospital less than an hour after she left the Omni Parker House Hotel. By 3:08 a.m., a triage nurse is writing, is alert, and she's oriented. Dr. Lindsay Walsh and Nurse Carly Littlejohn, they were both interacting with by 3:39 in the morning. They determined her to be clinically sober with no concerns for intoxication. Answered Carly Littlejohn's questions about what had happened, which Carly Littlejohn summarized here on Form 3 from the evidence collection kit. She answered more of her questions on the other forms that you saw in that kit. Forms 2A, 2B. She was coherent. She was clear. You heard that her thought process, her demonstrated thought process was linear. Her motor skills weren't impaired in any way. And she was able to answer all of the questions that they asked appropriately. She was able to consent to the evidence collection kit, and during the pelvic examination, you heard that Dr. Walsh collected some swabs from inside of her body and also noted a vaginal tear. Both Dr. Walsh and Nurse Carly Littlejohn, who, by the way, Carly Littlejohn was with for hours that morning in the emergency department. They told you exactly how she presented. These are two medical professionals who told you that they saw absolutely no signs whatsoever that she was impaired in any way. She was not suffering from some kind of altered mental state. The medical records that you have in evidence document not only their notes, but the notes of the attending physician and other nurses who interacted with that morning. And there is not a single word in that record supporting the defense in this case that was drunk or impaired or displaying a very confused thought process and fabricating a rape. Yes, she had been drinking alcohol intermittently over the course of that day. You heard about all the different variables, all the different factors that affect the way different people on different days might metabolize or process alcohol differently. And I told you this was not an unusual amount of alcohol for her to drink, especially given how much time had gone by. But most importantly, not only did you hear how she presented in the emergency department, you got to see with your own eyes exactly how she was presenting throughout the night. You have video from the Black Rose. You have video from street cameras showing her walk back to the hotel under her own power, steady on her feet, not stumbling. You saw video of her ascending the stairs of the hotel, walking to room 610. And then you saw video minutes after she left that hotel room, walking to the elevator, making her way appropriately down to the exit, walking down those stairs and out the door. And you saw that clearly worded series of text messages that she sent at 2:18 in the morning. She spoke with the Boston police at the hospital that morning. She answered their questions about what happened to her. And during that short interview, she was able to give them information that led to every bit of evidence that they would eventually find, leading them to identify Terrence Crosby as her attacker. And no, didn't say to detectives, I know who raped me, and his name is Terrence Crosby. Terrence Crosby was a stranger to her. He was a non-event. He had no significance to her whatsoever. Told the police and you what happened. And it was all of the other evidence that the Boston police were able to find that told you who did it. The evidence is what led the Boston police to identify Terrence Crosby as the man who did this. And as you review all of the evidence in this case, I suggest that you review it through this framework. If she is so unreliable, if she was so impaired, then how did she get so much right? How could she possibly have predicted that all of this outside evidence would exist to support what she said? So let's go through some of that corroborating evidence now. She said that she was at the Black Rose with two of her coworkers, and the same day that she told Detective McDonough that, he was able to go to the Black Rose and find video of the time frame and of what she was doing, eating and drinking with her colleagues, dancing and meeting a man. Later on in the night, leaving with that man. Her testimony about what she did earlier that day, where she went, who she went with, what she did, that was all corroborated by testimony. She went to a work event at Big Night Live. She went to State Street Provisions. She was out with her bosses. And then she and two of her colleagues went to the Black Rose. I told you she went back to the Omni Parker house with the man she met at a bar. And lo and behold, when police went looking for video at the Omni Parker house and from street cameras, they found this. And this man between the Black Rose and the Omni Parker house. And then this video of and that man going into the Omni Parker house. She said that they had to take an elevator to go up to the man's hotel room, and he used a key card to enter. And again, what did the police find? Evidence to show just that.
All right, let's get a break, but first check in with our guest for the hour in New Jersey, Livingston, New Jersey, trial attorney Crystal Pettiford. Crystal, this is what a case. It could go either way. It's all about who do you believe as a juror. What are your takeaways?
My takeaways are that the prosecution is doing a really good job to establish, like, why would the victim create this entire story? Establishing that although she admits to having drinks earlier in the evening, that she was conscious and awake enough to be able to immediately leave the hotel room, give a recounting of what transpired within 3 minutes, go to the hospital. The staff at the hospital, the nurses are saying she was clinically sober, able to recount everything that happened to her. She has no relationship with this man. She doesn't know him. She has no basis to fabricate all of these things. And while the argument by the defense is she was highly intoxicated, all of the things that she's saying is aligning with the evidence that the police recovered. I think the prosecution is doing a great job to establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Crystal, what do you think of the defense close? I mean, the defense made it very clear there is no evidence here that this man even touched her. He took the stand, said he didn't touch her. No relations at all.
Well, we all know that testimony is evidence, and we have a victim that's saying, listen, this is what happened to me. She's creating a sequence of events that aligns with the evidence that's there. And you also have a defendant who came to the state for a specific reason, who left before that event even occurred. You have a man that came into a room, immediately saw a woman laying in a bed that he was unfamiliar with. The question is, why would he even stay there? This isn't a situation where he's arguing consent. He's literally saying nothing ever happened. The jury's going to have to think of, why would the victim create this entire story and take herself through the emotional toll of a trial?
Yeah, it's true. The defense saying, well, that's reasonable doubt if you have two people telling a story, but if one of the stories doesn't make sense, I mean, they're both horrible, but his version of events basically is calling her clinically insane. Like, if she wasn't even in the bed, there was no interaction between them?
Well, defense is saying
minutes?
Alcohol and a prescription drug was in her system.
Right. Well, I get that. So now she's slurring her words and she's a little hammered and but she's delusional. I don't know. Crystal, what's your take on the effects of alcohol and a prescription med in her system making someone see things that aren't there? I mean, there's no history of mental illness here.
I mean, it would almost be saying that she's completely hallucinating. Having alcohol in your system doesn't mean you can't be a victim of rape. Are there people that have cloudy memories or remember things inaccurately because they're inebriated? Of course. The question then becomes, how is she able to send those text messages? How is she able to give so much detail? How is it that the hospital staff within hours of the event are able to have a full conversation with her and don't see any signs of intoxication or that she's not being coherent? It just doesn't, I mean, obviously both stories have some issues with it, but the defense trying to create her as almost like hallucinating, it just to me doesn't make much sense.
They've been out an hour and 24 minutes so far. I mean, will they come back fast? I have no idea.
First jury took 4 days, but they didn't deliberate full days, each one, but it took them a while. I think if you don't see them come back in the next, hour here, then you're going to have what we're seeing online. People believing one side or people believing the other. And Crystal, the odds of this being a hung jury the second time around they're pretty good here.
It's
one
fair.
would think, because nothing's changed except for we have 12 new people.
Yeah, it's definitely obviously a strong possibility as it ending the way the first trial went. But I think that the prosecution here and this time around, at least from what I just saw in the closing argument, did a great job at explaining why intoxication had no role in the allegations made by the alleged victim.
Yeah.
We shall see.
Yeah, can't wait to see what they come up with, what the verdict is in this one. Crystal, thank you so much. We're going to squeeze in a break.
Thank
When
you.
we come back, we'll continue to follow this case and listen to more of the state's closing argument.
You told the detective you were assaulted after you fell asleep, correct?
Yes.
And that you woke up to someone inside of you, right?
Yes.
Did you know where you were when you woke up?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you told the detective the person assaulting you was making reference to his friend being asleep, right?
Yes.
And you told the detective he was pushing you around the room trying to kiss you, right?
Yes.
And you would agree it's not a very big room, right?
There's enough room to be pushed around.
That was the alleged victim on the stand, the accuser on the stand during the trial. We heard from both sides, the defendant and the alleged accuser. In Massachusetts, the jury's been at it an hour and a half and counting. We're just finishing up the closing arguments. We listened to the defense and now we're listening to the Commonwealth. You listen to both of them and you're like, ooh, there's good points. Is this reasonable doubt?
Yeah.
Or not?
I say, I say there's reasonable doubt.
Okay, let's get back in and listen to the end of the Commonwealth's close.
Found evidence. Liam O'Brien walking off the elevator on the 6th floor, heading toward room 610, and then the door to room 610 opening at that same minute, 11:54 p.m., using that guest key card ending in 141. She said that while she was asleep, a different man with an Irish accent came into the room and raped her while Liam O'Brien was in there sleeping and snoring in the next bed. And she would have had no way of knowing this, but video and other records would show that another Irish man, the defendant, had entered that room 2 hours after she went in and 20 minutes before she left. He was the only other man in that room. 1:55 a.m. He goes in there. No one else went in, and there was no other door activity in that room block during that time period. So if got all of this wrong, if she's unreliable, if her word can't be trusted, what about all this other evidence supporting what she said? I knew she left the room in the middle of the night, minutes before sending those text messages. The hotel records and the video show that 3 minutes before she sent those texts, she walked out of the door to room 610 at 2:15 a.m., to the elevator, and then out the door of the Omni Parker house. Based on evidence that provided, Detective Joe McDonough was also able to determine that the man who she went back to the hotel with was this man, Liam O'Brien, that he was the registered guest of room 610 at the Omni Parker house, and that he had one accompanying guest in that hotel room, Terrence Crosby. Video and lock interrogation records from the Omni Parker house show that Liam O'Brien got off the elevator at 11:53 p.m., and then they entered room 610 at 11:54 p.m. And then the defendant comes walking down the hallway about a minute later away from room 610. And for the next 2 hours, you saw the defendant sitting in that chair, scrolling and waiting, just sitting. He was in that hotel with 8 other men. He's so tired. He's not knocking on a door saying, "Can I bunk up with you? Can we get a cot?" He's just sitting there waiting, knowing what's going on in that room. On March 15th, at the Omni Parker house, Detective McDonough saw that video of Terrence Crosby walking down the hall to room 610 at 1:55 a.m. And that was at the same time that he saw door activity on that room. And he knew on that day, even on March 15th, Detective McDonough knew that that was the only door in that room block that had any activity. And so from there, Detective McDonough went back and he pieced together the earlier part of the defendant's night. He found video of the defendant at the Black Rose. He saw that the defendant met a woman there. He danced with her. He sat with her for a long time, arm around her, kissing. And then there's also video of the defendant putting his hoodie on at 11:02 p.m. and he leaves with that woman. He's outside with her for about 10 minutes before coming back into the bar alone. And now the defendant is not charged in this case with being unfaithful or behaving in an unboundaried way relative to his wife. The evidence of the defendant's conduct with that woman at the Black Rose was presented to you to show you exactly what the defendant's plan was for that night, what his motive was, what he was looking to get out of that night. Detective McDonough later gathered video from street cameras showing the defendant's path of travel from the Black Rose to the Omni Parker house, and of him entering the Omni Parker house approximately 3 minutes before and Liam O'Brien. The next day, the day after Detective McDonough was able to view and gather these records, identified Liam O'Brien from this photo as the man that she had been with the previous night. Detective McDonough made his way to the Omni Parker house to look for Mr. O'Brien and to look for Terrence Crosby. And detectives met with Liam O'Brien that day. They were able to get a buccal swab from him, that swab from inside his cheek. They met with the defendant that day as well. He confirmed he was the person who entered room 610 while she was in there. He acknowledged he was in the room while she was in there, in bed, but claimed that he just heard her get out of bed and rummage around for her belongings. He told police that he was going to be in town until March 19th, that Tuesday, that he wasn't going anywhere, that he was there to march in the parade. But before he left that interview, he also tried to fish around for information about what he had disclosed. So Is she saying someone pinned her down on the bed and had sex with her? Why would he presume that? They hadn't shared any details with him to that point of what was said other than that it was a sexual assault. So how does Terrence Crosby, in that moment, just happen to guess the exact thing, the exact method, and in the exact place where was raped? In that interview, he also tried to lay the groundwork for why his DNA might later be found somewhere where it shouldn't be. He told them a bizarre story about having masturbated in the bed, in his bed, that morning while Liam O'Brien was at breakfast, before they all went out for the night, before Liam O'Brien came back to room 610. But the problem with that statement was there was no morning in Boston on Thursday for Terrence Crosby and Liam O'Brien. So there was no masturbating all over his bed while his colleague is supposedly down at breakfast. They were still in Ireland that morning. And when they arrived at the hotel at 4:05 p.m. and checked in, all of the evidence shows they were only in the room for about 35 minutes before they left. And even he acknowledges that he was never in the room alone during that time. So why did he say this to the police? Why would he bring this up? Think critically about this and ask yourselves, why was he trying to manufacture a reason that his DNA might later be found on or on her clothing? And if he claims that she was never even in his bed, because remember, he told you she's not in his bed, she's in the bed with Liam, right? So if she's never in his bed, why would he be so concerned about what he did and what he might have left behind on his own bed? Use your common sense here. He had just been confronted by the police, and now he's desperately trying to explain away what they might later find.
Erin Murphy delivering a very good close.
Yeah, some of those last points. The story, morning, she said there was no morning there in the Boston hotel.
Yeah, and he wanted to plant in the investigator's mind why they might find something that wasn't true. He didn't have the opportunity to do that. Let's get a break. When we come back, in real time, an hour and 40 minutes and counting, this jury deliberating the fate of an Irish fireman. Is he going home to Dublin tonight or off to the state pen?
I've committed so many horrific acts over and over and over.
Do you think you deserve to die for murdering those innocent people?
You tell me. I wish more than anything, David, that I would have done something other than the things I've done in my life.
Are you really a changed man, or is this some kind of stunt?
Interview with a Killer. 2-hour season premiere. Saturday night at 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
So the lights are off. You've taken out your flashlight on your phone. What did you do next?
I shone the light on the floor just to give myself a walkway past my bed, and then I knocked it off once I got there, and I got into the side of my bed close to the bathroom door and got into bed.
Did you see or hear Mr. O'Brien when you entered the room?
No.
And again, please remind the jury, which bed was yours?
The fourth bed on the right, the one closest to the bathroom.
Could you tell if your suitcase was there where you'd left it next to the bed?
It was still there, yes.
Was your bed still made?
It was as I had left it earlier, yes.
Was anyone in your bed?
There was nobody in my bed.
Well, that Irish accent is thick, and jurors were asked during voir dire if they had any kind of bias against Irish accents. So, it's kind of sometimes hard to understand him when he's testifying.
Yeah. Do people have bias against Irish accents?
I know. I didn't know they did, but maybe they were asked.
Yeah, and there were a couple things that, he said he had his torch instead of flashlight, and he was sitting by the lift instead of the elevator, which they talked about. And then they tried to use it, the defense, to their advantage. He said on the stand, I would never call my buddy Liam a loser, because in Ireland, we don't use that term. So that is, and he made a big deal out of that. Let's go back into court now, pick up more of the Commonwealth's closing argument.
The defendant bought himself some time with the police. He answered some questions, and once they were gone, took a little bit of time at the hotel, and he took off. He packed his bag. He bought a plane ticket. He got himself to Logan Airport. And then he tried to flee the United States and go back to Ireland. Terence Crosby didn't try to leave the United States because he went back to his hotel room and he found the door ajar. That's not why he did it. He left the Omni Parker house and he went to Logan Airport because he knew he was busted. Everyone else who he had flown into Boston with, they stayed until Tuesday, March 19th. The Delta records that you saw, they show all of those men stayed. They took their flight home as scheduled, including Liam O'Brien, who was also questioned by the police that same morning. But just a few hours after speaking with detectives, the defendant bought himself a new ticket through a different airline, scheduled to take off that very night. But Detective Joe McDonough learned of his attempt, and he had him removed from a plane that was about to take off from Logan Airport right around 7:20 that night. So a bit about the DNA here, which is a piece of the evidence here. This is not the be-all, end-all, but that weekend, the same weekend that this happened, Jennifer Ozog and Rebecca Boissé went into the Boston Police Crime Lab to work. They went in there to test the evidence collection kit. There was biological material, amylase, an enzyme found in large quantities in human saliva, on her breast swab and on her genital swab, a swab taken from inside the folds of labia. The DNA from the amylase on the breast swab was later linked, unsurprisingly, to as the source of the possible major contributor to that profile, and it was linked to Liam O'Brien as the possible secondary contributor of that profile. But the genital swab was different. In addition to the full female DNA profile that was found on that swab, which, yes, the defendant was excluded as the source of the full female DNA profile, there was also male DNA detected. But the Boston Police Crime Lab, they weren't equipped to do the requisite testing or do what the next step in the testing would be. And so you heard that Rebecca Boissé sent the sample to another lab that does YSTR testing. And that was because there was a large amount of female DNA competing with a smaller amount of male DNA on the genital swab. And remember, YSTR testing is that type of DNA testing that's better at isolating male DNA from female DNA. And when Alexis DeCessaris from Bodie, when she tested that male DNA found on the genital swab, she determined that there were two distinct male contributors. And no, it couldn't be compared to the known references for either Terence Crosby or Liam O'Brien. But one thing was conclusive about the YSTR testing, and that's that there were two different males who contributed to the DNA found on that genital swab. And remember, this is a swab taken from inside the folds of labia. This is not DNA that crawled up in there from a towel left on the bed or from some purported handshake. This is from an intimate spot. The only person that had consensual sex with during that 5-day period leading up to this was Liam O'Brien. So when considering whatever the value is of the DNA evidence in this case, ask yourself, does the presence of two distinct male contributors on a swab taken from her genitals on March 15th support account, or does it support the defense claim that she only had sex with Liam O'Brien and nothing else happened? And now, despite all of the evidence that have talked about corroborating account of what happened. The defense, they've pointed out what they want to frame as inconsistencies in her statements. But these aren't meaningful inconsistencies. She's a human being that was asked questions about a traumatic incident over and over the course of 19 months by different people with different purposes. First, detectives at the hospital trying to get preliminary information, nurses and doctors who were asking questions for purposes of medical treatment, later by a prosecutor at grand jury, in court at a prior proceeding, and then before you all during this trial. So sure, there are going to be slight differences in anyone's accounts. That's how human beings work. It doesn't make her testimony somehow shady or inconsistent or unreliable. She didn't come in here with a perfect, contrived, rehearsed story. And wouldn't it be suspicious? Wouldn't it be unreliable if she did? Ask yourself, were any of her answers meaningfully different? Or were these peripheral details that were not central to the heart of what happened here? And now you heard testimony from the defendant during the course of this trial. He has no burden here. Only the Commonwealth ever does. He can remain silent through the whole trial. That's his choice. But when a defendant gets up and he raises his right hand and he swears to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, you get to assess his credibility just like any other witness. You got to assess his testimony, whether it seemed like what he said had the ring of truth, whether his answers made sense, whether his testimony seemed scripted or insincere. Do you believe what he said about certain key points? And overall, wasn't his testimony just so precise and so careful and so rehearsed until he slipped up? He told you, oh no, we don't use words like friend in the Irish lexicon. I don't say that. It's mate. And that was to suggest to you that he couldn't have been the one to rape her, right? Because the way she paraphrased the man who attacked her statements was, it involved the use of the word friend. So he's saying that to try to suggest it couldn't have been him. He says he uses the word mate. But then he couldn't stick with the script. During his testimony, when he's talking about Liam O'Brien, what did he call him? His friend. He's my work friend. My friend Liam. He did clock it at one point, though. The defendant did. He heard himself say it, and he corrected it. Friend, I mean mate.
Pretty good close there from the Commonwealth. Let's get a break. We'll hear the rest of it when we return.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott.
And hi, everyone. I'm Kelly Craft. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. And we begin this hour in Boston, where deliberations are underway in the Irish firefighter rape trial against Terrence Crosby.
The defendant testified yesterday about visiting Boston with fellow firefighters to walk in the St. Patrick's Day parade last year. And that is when prosecutors say he raped a woman at a hotel.
The alleged victim, who has decided to remain nameless, says that she had consensual sex with another firefighter who was rooming with Crosby that night.
She claims that they fell asleep in separate beds, the one that she had consensual sex with, but later awoke to the defendant Crosby raping her. Crosby is expected to testify in his own defense at some point today. Actually, he's already testified. That's not quite right. We are in closing arguments in this particular case.
Yeah, we're replaying those closing arguments, and they have got they have the case. And you can see at the bottom of our screen an hour and 59 minutes that they have been deliberating so far. So we are keeping a close eye on this case, and I cannot wait to see what they decide in this case.
Same, and I predict it's going to be quite, not not quite a lengthy, but they have a lot to talk about back there.
Yeah, prosecutor and defense both gave really good closings. We're catching everyone up on them and also catching you up on the latest from Matt Johnson.
Oh, good. Let's bring in Matt Johnson. Nope, we're going to go back to court. Apologies. We're getting it all together here. Let's go back in. And again, bringing you those closing arguments. Let's go back in.
And so what else about his testimony? First, you heard he drank alcohol at several establishments before he got to the Black Rose. So, based on that alone, does that make him an unreliable reporter, just based on that alone? Or does he get a pass for that? So I'd ask you to consider that testimony. He admitted on the stand he entered room 610. He knew that Liam O'Brien was in there. He knew that he was in there. And he's sort of stuck with that, right? Because the video never shows them leaving. He's just sitting by the elevators. And now, testifying before you, he's trying to account for that full 20 minutes that he's in the room. And he's going to fill that time because otherwise 20 minutes is an awfully long time for some rummaging around a room. And so then he told you a detail that he's never said before. Not to the police, not in a prior proceeding. They spent 15 minutes rummaging around and going to the bathroom before she left. He is trying to explain away those critical 20 minutes, those 20 minutes when he was coming into the hotel room, getting himself undressed, preparing himself, however he did that, for what he was about to do, then getting on top of her, forcing his penis into her unsuspecting body, and then trying to keep her in the room before she was able to leave. And what about his testimony at the woman at the bar? What was the defendant actually after that night? You know that at about, 7 hours after he landed in Boston for this guy's trip, a social trip, not a work trip, but 7 hours after he landed, he's already in a bar kissing a woman who's not his wife. He spent all his time at the bar with this woman, dancing with her, talking, smiling, laughing. He's not looking to end it with kissing. He put in the time with her. And do you really credit that the defendant, ever the gentleman, just politely declined her invitation to go home? No. Terrence Crosby, he got left. He got left by that woman outside. He came back into the bar alone and empty-handed, his hopes for the night unfulfilled, and he watched Liam O'Brien have better luck with her. You can see on the video, he's sitting at the table, he's got his beer, he's looking at his watch, he's watching them kiss and laugh and have a good time. And then he went back to the hotel and he waited outside of his own hotel room for 2 hours, knowing what his friend, Liam O'Brien, was likely doing inside that hotel room. And then he went into that room, he found her naked, completely vulnerable, in the bed that was supposed to be his, and Liam O'Brien was dead to the world in the bed next to her, the other bed. He knew that the only possible witness was oblivious to what he was about to do. And that is the moment where opportunity met his intent. He had spent the night at the bar looking for a woman, and now he had one right where he wanted her. Terrence Crosby's defense would have you believe that this is all one big misunderstanding. Look away at all of the evidence that points to his guilt. Look over here instead. Look at what she drank. Look at what she did with another man. She didn't even remember his name. Look at her. It's just the word of a woman. But there is no misunderstanding here. I told you exactly what happened to her in that hotel room, and the rest of the evidence told you who did it. Terrence Crosby thought that he could come to this city, that he could come to Boston, and that he could rape anonymously and with impunity and then skip town like it never happened. But that's not how it works, and that's not how it worked out for Terrence Crosby. The Boston police stepped in. Detective Joe McDonough and other detectives in the sexual assault unit, they did their jobs. They worked quickly and diligently to identify the stranger who had raped in a downtown hotel room. Detective McDonough had a plane turned around to make sure that the defendant stayed right here in the United States so that he could be right here in front of all of you. Has never been the person who said, Terrence Crosby is the man who did this to me. She didn't know him, she didn't know his name, and he didn't know her, which is likely why he underestimated the woman he chose to victimize, because she thought quickly. She got herself to safety, out of harm's way. She got herself to a hospital and to police to help. And she came to this courtroom and she told you what happened to her inside of that hotel room. She didn't wake up in the middle of the night and fabricate a rape. And if that were true, how could that fabricated report somehow lead police to all of this external evidence? How is it possible that her report would lead them to a man who would make incriminating statements and just happen to guess the exact way he was raped? How did she will two distinct male contributors onto the genital swab taken from her body? And how on earth did she manage to get Terrence Crosby on a plane to try to flee the country after being confronted by police? You now know the name Terrence Crosby as the man who raped in that room. Not a maybe, not a probably, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That is a high burden, but it is the same burden in every criminal case, in every courthouse, in the Commonwealth, and in the history of this country. There's no mystery man here. There's no phantom rapist who slipped off into the night. Terrence Crosby, he is not the unluckiest man in the world. He's just someone who did a terrible, terrible thing to another person simply because he wanted to and because he thought that he could. But don't ignore the evidence. Why would you turn away from all of the evidence pointing to Terrence Crosby? Turn toward the evidence and find the defendant guilty